1 0.
Hurry, step right up, folks. Here's the answer to your problems. Dr. Utopia's sensational new discovery, ISM. ISM will cure any ailment of the body politic. It's terrific. It's tremendous. Once you swallow the contents of this bottle, you'll have the bountiful benefit of higher wages, shorter hours, and security. Enormous profits, no strikes. And now then, because we are introducing this amazing item for the first time in this country, it isn't going to cost you 1 cent. All you have to do is sign this little scrap of paper, and you get your bottle absolutely free.
I hereby turn over to ISM Incorporated everything I have, including my freedom and the freedom of my children and my children's children, in return for which said ISM promises to take care of me forever.
All this hate and violence is being facilitated by a handful of internet companies that amount to the greatest propaganda machine in history.
Dear Mr. President and Madam Vice President, I come to you today to speak about some concerns that I have for the people. So since we have the wall to block up the immigrants, I believe we should take it down because I want everybody to have an equal opportunity to better themselves in their lives.
In your first 100 days, Congress can improve communities' resistance to climate impacts. Legislation should take climate change into consideration immediately.
Dear President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, over the course of the next 4 years, young people all around the nation encourage you to make college debt reform a central theme in your administration.
Dear Mr. President and Madam Vice President, young people need your administration to prioritize making a college education affordable for everyone.
Dear Mr. President and Madam Vice President, young people need to know you prioritize financially supporting low and no income families during the remainder of this pandemic. Yes, we have just faced the traumatic realization that MAGA supporters will be a challenge during your presidency, but realistically, you cannot control one's opinion. Last thing we need is another president who cares more about disrespecting the Constitution than prioritizing hard-working families.
Dear Mr. President and Madam Vice President, young people need you to prioritize making more people eligible for Obamacare / the Affordable Care Act.
Dear Mr. President and Madam Vice President, young people need you to prioritize health care. It affects us and our families.
First, efforts should be made in order to ensure that more people are eligible for health care through the Affordable Care Act. Additionally, strict limits should be placed on carbon emissions in order to slow down climate change. In the early days of the presidency, Congress should pass immigration reform in order to grant a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. Congress should be pushed to pass a larger bill for coronavirus relief to help families and businesses recover. Finally, please urge the public to wear masks when they are outside to slow the spread of COVID-19.
Dear Mr. President and Madam Vice President, if we don't act now, in 9 years, our planet will be ruined and many species will be extinct.
Dear Mr. President and Madam Vice President, the young people need you to prioritize COVID vaccine distribution and lockdowns first.
Mr. President and Madam Vice President, during your first 100 days, you need to institute reforms on police brutality, continue with the mask mandate, and rejoin the global effort for climate change.
Dear Mr. President and Madam Vice President, young people need to prioritize the COVID crisis that we have going on in the U.S. right now. Seeing as though the cases are really starting to surge, especially with the new strain that's going around, and other countries are beating COVID, I just find it interesting how we just can't seem to do it, and it really needs more of your attention.
Dear Mr. President and Madam Vice President, young people need you to prioritize equal access to healthcare, because this pandemic has only highlighted the disparities that exist between different racial and social groups.
Dear Mr. President and Madam Vice President, as we near Inauguration Day, it's becoming clear to many Americans that change is coming. However, what change can we expect? In your first 100 days as presidents, you should repeal the Muslim ban, rejoin the global effort against climate change, and make more people eligible for healthcare through the Affordable Care Act.
Dear Mr. President and Madam Vice President, young people need you to prioritize helping the citizens financially due to COVID-19. Whether you help by sending a stimulus or by sending a check every month, these people need you, otherwise they will lose their homes.
Dear Mr. President and Madam Vice President, this country desperately needs your aid after this chaotic year. We need you to stop the spread of false rumors regarding COVID-19, pass stronger gun control regulation, and cancel student loan debt.
And the worst part of this, Duke, is that they have even gotten some rhino Republicans on board. Senator John Cornyn of Texas, Representative Tom Cole of Oklahoma, another Republican.
There is nothing wrong with your screen. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling the messaging in this transmission. We will tell you the topics you may speak about. We will remove any speech we deem unfit. We will identify and protect you from all that is evil. You need only put your full trust in us. We are the government, and we are here to help.
Jack, how are you today, sir?
Well, if I were doing any better, they'd probably put me in jail, Georgie. How about you?
Doing well, doing well. Crazy week. Definitely excited to be back on, though, to have these conversations. You know, I know that you've been digging up some stuff. We decided to do this conversation on propaganda, and of course, you know, based off the intro video we just showed, quite a bit of that relates to this creepy act that they're trying to put out. Fortunately, it hasn't been put out. It hasn't been signed into anything yet or approved by House or Senate, but it just recently was written and released, and we'll get into that later. But
you know what it reminds me of, George? Sorry to cut you off, but you just shared this with me last night, and it reminds me of something else that I saw. Is the in China they have the Uyghurs. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but you're probably familiar with them being isolated and many of them murdered. And what they do is they've been having these videos of the Uyghurs, and they're speaking and they're talking about Mike Pence and how Mike Pence is against Asians. They don't even get TV there, but they're trying to show that they're against the United States and that they're fine. Meanwhile, the population has been brought down from let me see, I have some stats on it. It's been brought down. There were 92,000 of them in 2016. There's only 20,000 today. And the people that they have rounded up, they're in these reconditioning camps, and they're having them post these propaganda videos. So when I watched that intro video you put together, God, I mean, there's some similarities there.
Yeah, and honestly, this, I mean, we'll get into this, but like, this is the creepiest thing. Now, mind you, you know, it could just end up being something like the new Green Deal, where everyone just kind of chuckles and walks away. But like, it's the idea that this is what they want to do, right? Like no one took the Green New Deal seriously. This, though, you know, you have to take serious, because just throwing it out there, just the fact that someone would write this bill and throw it out there. And when you read the bill, you know, and we'll get into the cryptic messaging, it's like word salad. You know, they keep using the word civics as if, you know, it's the civics that we all know and that we all love. You know, oh, this is how, remember the little video of the bill who it's like, this is how a bill is made, and he goes through all the process. Like that's what people who are sane think about when they think about civics. That's not what these people think about. So, you know, to them, action civics is the whole thing. But, you know, like I said, you know, we'll get into it. I want to start off with some other propaganda examples. But before I even get started, I you know, there's a lot of movements these days, and a lot of activists with a lot of causes. And I personally have taken up a cause of my own that I would like to discuss on the show to try and get some support behind it. So I'm thinking about starting a GoFundMe page. I haven't really gotten there yet, but really what it is, Free Pepe Le Pew, baby. Free Pepe Le Pew. These are the things that matter to me, okay? These are the things that matter to me. So if you're watching out there in the ether, you see this, you go ahead, you be loud, you make your voice heard. you get out in the streets and you help free Pepe Le Pew. All right. So now that I've gotten that off my chest, one of the things we did when one of the directions I go, I don't think people really know what our process is here, that we kind of both go in our own directions and then on the same topic and then come back and see what we came up with. And the direction that I went was to go look at these fact check websites, right? And we kind of debated whether or not that's censorship or if that's propaganda, right? But in the context, I think we agreed on this. In the context where they fact check something and leave it up, right? So if they pull something off the web, it's censorship. If they fact check it and leave it up there, now it's propaganda, right? Because now they're taking something and they're manipulating it to giving you the idea that what this person is saying is false. And the more you tag that title on an individual, the more likely it is that people who see that individual in the future will see, even if it doesn't have the false claim on it, will just regard that person as being false. And it is clearly a method of controlling the messaging, right? And then, so who to go after with the fact checking? There's so many of them that are just ridiculous and no name fact check websites. So I decided to just focus on Politico, who does the fact check website, who does the fact checking for the website Facebook and Twitter. So that makes Politico a significant player in this conversation. So my attitude was, let's focus on them. So what I want to do is just start to make the case. There were a couple of there are a lot of them that fall under the same theme. So I just picked two that I thought, in my opinion, demonstrated the point that I'm about to make. The more once you open your eyes to looking at these fact check websites this way, assuming you're a constructive thinker and that you're open to the idea that, and in a fact check website's case, this would be a shout out to leftists who, all the fact check websites are shooting down conservatives. So they do have some stuff that goes against leftists, but in the end, every single they go out and find claims to say that they're false when they weren't even intentionally, supposed to be controversial claims. So in this case, and I am trying to pull this up here, excuse me, as I produce and speak at the same time. It's not as hard as chewing gum and walking, but it's still challenging. So Politico decided to pick out a quote from Donald Trump, which he had made a comment of right after the Capitol riots, that he had requested 10,000 National Guard troops to defend the Capitol. And Politico jumped on this. And what they basically said was the request that Trump made for 10,000 National Guardmen for his rally, but was rejected by Pelosi. But it wasn't rejected. But he never said that Pelosi rejected it. He said something completely different, which I will get into. But the reality is, look where the quotes are. They're strategically placed. It's just simply inaccurate. For that person, Politico has this. If your time is short. Okay, so there's no evidence that Trump made a request, basically telling you, if you're really not going to read the whole article, let's just get this over with right off the bat. We'd much rather you do this. Just go ahead and knock it out, which really just leaves you to sit back and think. If you like Trump, you'll be like, it's not false. And if you don't like Trump, you're like, ha, just like I thought. And you click away from it without ever reading the article. Now, what makes this article actually super interesting is that Politico debunks its own story in its own story. I didn't even have to go out and find factual information to debunk them. Just based off what they say, you can see what they're doing. And what they do, and what many of these fact check websites do, is they don't tell you whether it's a fact or not. They tell you whether they think it's a fact or not. So they basically analyze it, come to a conclusion based off completely subjective material, and then go ahead and make a decision on what it is. So for you to see it, you can see the quote right here. We said to the Department of Defense, the top person, that's Chris Miller, days before we had the rally, I definitely gave the number of 10,000 National Guardsmen. I think you should have 10,000 National Guard ready. They took that number. From what I understand, they gave it to the people at the Capitol, which is controlled by Pelosi, and I heard they rejected it because they didn't think it would be a good look. So, it was a big mistake. He never says there that Pelosi did this. He said it was sent to the Capitol, which, by the way, is where these decisions get made. Capitol security is decided by the House, okay? So Pelosi is in charge of the House, and this is kind of confusing because some people remember, and Politico actually brings this up, which is even more slanted, that Trump used the National Guard in June to deal with some of the protesting and riots. Well, in that scenario, and it's a very unique scenario, the president does have some control over the National Guard. However, normally speaking, the National Guard on a state level is controlled by the governors, okay, not the president. So the president can use them, like I said, and he did that time. But when it comes to protecting the Capitol, it's not a state. Okay, so there is no, it gets a little fuzzier with the Capitol. It's the House that's responsible for the defense of it, for the security of it. And I'll show you a conversation that Chris Miller recalls, who was the acting Secretary of Defense at the time, and what he says. The president, Miller recalled, asked how many troops the Pentagon planned to turn out the following day. We're going to provide any National Guard support that the district requests, Miller responded. And Trump goes, you're going to need 10,000 people. No, I'm not talking bullshit. He said that. We're like, maybe, but someone's going to have to ask for it. At that point, Miller remembered the president telling him, do what you need to do. So basically what Trump is saying is, look, this is what you're going to need. You need to request this, right? Like you need to, whatever you got to do. And actually, you can see where you look at the quote and he's telling him, Chris Miller is telling Trump, like, someone's going to need to ask for it. Clearly acknowledging that it ain't going to be you because it's not your gig. This is not your call. Right? And the bottom line is Politico just basically made half of this story up so that they could debunk it. So someone tweeted it, Politico grabbed it, reframed it, put it up on their website as a false statement. When the entire time, what he said was technically true. At best, this should have been mostly true. At best. Because he never said Pelosi did this. He just said she runs the show where this got buried. So this got sent to the Capitol. They said they didn't like it. He didn't say Pelosi said that she didn't like the look of that many National Guardsmen around. He just said they said, and that they're run by Pelosi. All of that is true. They are run by Pelosi, and then they take a quote from Pelosi's spokesperson that says, we never got a direct request from the president for this. And it's like, once again, the president doesn't request this, number one. Number two, what do you think Nancy Pelosi's spokesperson is going to say after a riot broke out and whoever didn't have the National Guardsmen there is going to hang? Like, of course they're going to say. So they took an email that's what they cited as their source, was an email from Pelosi's spokesperson to debunk the second part of the claim, which was never made. Like, it wasn't even a claim that was made, right? So, but this is how they operate, right? Now, if you look, you can see clearly where they do their subjective stuff. So they base this whole thing false because, in their opinion, Trump wondered aloud to Chris Miller. That wasn't him telling Chris Miller he was concerned and wanted to see that many people at that many soldiers deployed. I mean, it's just crazy. He's like, you need to do what she's talking directly to him. He's, when you say he wondered aloud, that's like, what are you thinking, right? Like I'm just thinking out loud, right? Like I'm just like I'm talking to myself, kind of, speaking out loud, what I have on my mind. He's having a direct conversation with the defense secretary, the acting defense secretary, telling him you're going to need 10,000 people. That's not wondering aloud. That's telling him. And he said, you do whatever you got to do. Because the guy was basically telling him, look, we can't just do it. Someone has to request it. right? And that request has to come from the Capitol. So, and Trump just kind of doing what Trump does, because he's always been an executive in the truest sense, not in the political sense. It's just like, you do what you got to do to get it done. But that's what you're going to need, right? And then it didn't get done. So whoever the person is that shot it down, maybe Nancy Pelosi didn't personally shoot it down, right? Maybe it got shot down before it even got to her, right? Maybe they gave this request in. It didn't come from Trump, so it came from the defense secretary. So they gave it in, and it got buried before it made it to Pelosi's desk, because they want her to have plausible deniability. That's totally possible. But the idea, I mean, the only way you could call this false is if you're going to say the defense secretary is a liar. If you're going to go down that road, then you can say, well, he's just a liar, and we know it. And because he's a liar, this is false. But assuming that he's telling the truth, which they are, there's no way to debunk this story as mostly false. There's no way. I'll give you a little bit to say mostly true. It doesn't have to be, fact. You can say mostly true, but you can't say mostly false, or what they did was false. Actually, they didn't say mostly false. They just said it's straight bullshit. And that was just nonsense, right? So the other point, and this is, Politico's got a history of this, by the way. All of their fact checks, when you read a Politico fact check, always understand that there's this element of fakeness in there, where they're throwing their opinion in, and basically giving you a set of facts and then interpreting those for you, instead of just giving you the set of facts and letting you decide if it's a fact or not. They take it, they interpret it, and then they give you a verdict based on their interpretation. And their interpretation is always left-leaning, always. Okay, and this Politico was started by two WAPO reporters. WAPO is the Washington Post. It was started by two WAPO journalists who went and did their own thing, because I guess the Post just wasn't liberal enough for them, and decided to go and take it to another level. And then somehow got the authorization to be the all authority on what's true and what's not on the internet. I mean, it's just crazy. So, but in the end, anyway, the case was made for that situation. You could decide for yourself, whether what you thought of that quote that was made. I laid out my point for it, and the second point that I want to make is the Candace Owens. So Candace Owens, this one is more blatant than even the Trump one, because they had to retract it. They got sued, and they had to retract it, and as a result, you can't get any more clear than a retraction, right? So here's what came in. So here is Candace's tweet, right? So if you look towards the bottom, what she said was, Joe Biden is literally and legally not the president-elect. So why is the media pretending that he is, right? And at the time that she posted this, she was 100% right. It was November 13th. He was not the president-elect. And it's not even like an old scenario of something where, like, let's say Reagan smashes, what was it, Dukakis, right?
Right.
So he smashes Dukakis, won like 49 states. It's like, all right, like Dukakis conceded, like it was over, right? Like once the other guy concedes, then you can start talking about who's the president-elect. That's the earliest. You can't talk about it until the electoral votes are in. I think that's December 6th. But in the end, it doesn't even matter. Like, the point is, it was being contested. There were legal challenges everywhere. The election process was a mess. No matter how you think about it, there was so much crap going on. Reality speaking, even the president of Mexico was not willing to call Joe Biden the president-elect, and yet the media was on this mission to make that case, right? They're on this mission. And I provide links when you guys are looking for the stuff before I edit this, when we re-put it up to get rid of the stuff that I just did. We're going to put links. There's going to be a list of them to all the different websites. There's like 6 of them. It was CNN, NBC, CBS, all of them putting out stories immediately after the election, casually calling Joe Biden the president-elect of the United States when they knew damn well he wasn't. And it's a clear propaganda messaging campaign being taken on by the media. They're not coming out and saying he's president-elect as the result of, something that, like they're writing an article about the debate on it. Like they're just going off on, like, President-elect Joe Biden says everyone should be wearing masks. President-elect Joe Biden says everyone should be doing this. President-elect Joe Biden is grateful for his victory. And it's just all of these mentions using the term President-elect Joe Biden while this is being contested, right? And that's propaganda in its truest sense, right? Because this is all of them getting together. The more you read, the more you see. CNN's talking it every time they mention him. They call him President-elect. All the major networks are calling him President-elect, just completely pretending like there's no, like everything's fine, and like there are no lawsuits going on. There are no, even though they're spending half their day reporting on these lawsuits, talking about how crazy they are, right? Even then, they won't acknowledge that they exist and just keep calling the guy President-elect.
Yeah,
So
they're staging for a mindset, right? So
yeah,
I set the stage to develop a mindset, and this way, all right, it's why would you even dispute that? It's just another tiny small piece of what goes on, really.
it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Here's the retraction. So if you look at the bottom, she sued him. Good for her. She sued him. She was like, they slapped a false tag on her on Facebook and gave a retraction on Twitter. Right? So the people who read it on Facebook highly likely don't have Twitter, because Facebook, there are so many more Facebook users than Twitter users. I go over that all the time. But they went ahead and had to acknowledge, yeah, we totally were wrong. And it's not like they didn't know they were wrong. Anybody who understands basic civics, or at least the civics we know, we'll get into that in a minute, but at least the civics we know, anybody who understands basic civics knows that that was true. What she said was 100% true, right? He was not. So why was the media doing that? And that's what she was pointing to. And that's why I went and found all those links, just to back up the validity of the post she was making. Because as time goes on, that gets lost, right? That gets lost in the sauce that there were so many, where were these articles? Even Al Jazeera was doing it. Everybody was doing it. Like, they were sending out the global message that President Joe Biden is a thing, and not he should be a thing, not there's a good chance he could be a thing, not that it's looking good for, no, he is. He won. It's done. Everything's good. Nothing to see here. Everybody move on.
Well,
Right?
it's part of a whole discrediting process and a staging process. I investigated one as well. And I don't know if you know who Liz Wheeler is, but I follow her.
Yeah, she was on that OAN network, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, she did a piece on New York Bill A416. And what that bill does is it allows New York State to put people in camps for various reasons surrounding COVID, right? And the video was labeled false. And the reason was it said there is no New York bill allowing the government to put people in camps for various reasons surrounding COVID scheduled to pass on January 6th.
What was it, not scheduled to pass on January 6th?
No, so she said exactly, they took exactly what she said, her sentence, and then added scheduled to pass on January 6th.
Right.
So
but that's what I'm saying. So it wasn't scheduled to pass on January 6th, and that's why it was false?
Yes, they added it. Right. She was just laying out pure fact. They added to her statement and then said that addition was false.
Right.
So,
right.
You know what? And that was done by a company called Fact Checker, or the Fact Checker was a company called Lead Stories. Guess who they're funded by? They're funded by Facebook, Google, and ByteDance. And I don't know if you know, but ByteDance owns TikTok, which is, of course, the home of the white monkey.
So
do you know what I mean by that, or no?
Yeah, I do. So TikTok is still owned by Chinese companies?
Yeah. Well, so in China, it's called.
Didn't they get broken up or something, or didn't some U.S. companies want to step in and buy them?
Supposedly, but
I don't remember how that ended.
They all play in together. So in China, it's called Douyin, and that is TikTok there. And for the audience that didn't understand the white monkey comment, Basically, what that is are U.S. and Canadian white people talking about why China is better than the United States. So they're fluent in Chinese, they live in China, and they issue propaganda across Douyin, which is TikTok there. So TikTok is a propaganda tool in China and has been brought over here as a propaganda tool as well. I think we could do a deeper dive on that one in the future, but because it's very interesting, some of the stuff. Most adults don't go on TikTok, but you got to see some of the poison that they're hitting our kids with.
Yeah, China's propaganda. China is next level, right? So China, I mean, right now the U.S. is trying to get to where they are, right? Like we'll get into that in a minute. We're trying to get to that Chinese propaganda level, which is really disturbing, because this Civics secures. So Civics secures democracy. I always tongue twister right now. Civics secures Democracy Act. This is what they're trying to pass, Jack. This is what I called you about and was telling you about, that I was so heated over. And it's not something that actually, that whole intro video was about that, but it's not something that's actually passed yet. It's brand new. I believe it came out around March 21st. I am following this bill very closely. And I do want to devote a good portion of the show to what it's about, because it's brutal. So what they're trying to do, okay, is basically take uh, take financial grants, which, if you know how local schools work, they're always, a lot of their decision making is made based on federal funding, which is something we truly need to get the hell off of. Okay. And it's this way because of pensions. Okay. It's this way because of pensions. I know teachers don't like to hear that, but that's the reality. Like, and it's not even because the older teachers are going to get pensions. It's because they're still offering them to brand new hires. Like, they have no plan to get off this pension budget. And the reality is, it leaves the states broke, and their school systems broke. And as a result, they require federal funding. This has been going on for decades. And so when the federal government wants to institute something into education, they dangle the grant money. And then, like lapdogs, the superintendents and district people and governors, they all jump. They all jump for it. It's like, no, we need you to do this. No. You know, it's like that commercial with the fisherman with the dollar on it. Right? He's like, whoa, right. Almost got it, right? So, and by doing this is how they control the local schools. So what this bill is going to do is it's going to give them the ability to reallocate this grant money that they're already manipulating. This is how Common Core gets instituted. This is how anything the federal government wants to get instituted. This is how they do it. They play with the grant money. The schools are strapped. They have no money. And so the schools do whatever the federal government says because they want the money, right? And no one ever thinks that maybe this is a bad idea. No one's ever said that. There's zero leadership in the education systems across the United States that is willing to acknowledge this as a problem and start to work to restructure this, because there's plenty of money out there. It's just being spent irresponsibly. And that's why.
That's where we need the parent. That's where we need the parents to step in.
Absolutely. But this act now will circumvent the parents. So in the past, if you had a problem that you wanted to take up, you didn't like something in the curriculum, you don't like something that's going on at your school, you would take it up with your school board. You would take it up with, maybe you get active in the process. This is going to change all that. There's going to be nothing you have to say about this. Okay.
So I'm confused. Let me ask you a question. So on one hand, you're saying grant money and dangling the carrot.
Correct.
But are you saying that this is going to be put in place?
It's not extra grant money. It's money that they're getting now. Like it's not like they're taking more money and saying, hey, here's a new carrot. They're taking the half-eaten carrot that's already out there and taking it away, and then saying, we'll give it back if you do this. So if you don't do it, the schools are going to do it. Put it that way. They're going to do it. And it ain't going to matter what the parents say, because if they don't do it, they'll be going broke. That's how dependent they are on federal funding. Okay, this is how bad of a hole that they've dug themselves in, which is why the Federal Department of Education does this. Okay, they've been doing this for decades. This is how it works. I sat there asking, a good friend of mine who's an assistant principal, and I was asking them, why won't they let the kids go back for COVID? It's like, well, it's the grant money. Like Newsom was hanging money over their head because the feds were hanging money over his head, and it was like, this is how they control it on the way down. Okay, so it's like, and it's so much money, and they're so dependent on it that they don't have a choice. So you think they do, right? When you just hear it, you're like, oh, well, they just don't take the grant money. Well, no, it's not that easy. You're gonna have to you're gonna have to restructure your entire budget and change the entire way you do things, because the way you've been doing them has set up a system where you're absolutely dependent on these people. So from a people's perspective, the way that you cut this off nip this at the bud is just don't let the bill pass.
Right.
And then get engaged with the rest of the process. But just understand, I'm only telling you this, not like the issue at hand right here is the bill, right? But like, I'm just explaining the funding and how this stuff works and why the bill works, because I don't want someone to read it and be like, well, it's just grant money. So schools just won't take the grant money. It's not that easy. It's not that easy.
So looking at it from a solution standpoint, I'm just curious. Tell me what you think of the possibility. Let's take a state that's getting very active in their education, right? I think one of those states recently was Arizona. What if the governor of Arizona were to turn around and say, all right, going forward, we're eliminating pensions and you have to use a 401k? Is that within his power to do so?
Every state's going to be different. So, I don't know the ins and outs of every state legislature. You got to remember, we're the United States, right? We're not America, right? We're the United States of America. So these guys all get their imperial powers given to them by their own constitutions in their own states. So whether they're heavy-handed stuff or it's very light stuff, it's all decided by each state. So, some states that may need to go through the legislature, other ones, it may be an executive order. I would argue taking pensions out, depending on the state, right? So I would think a more conservative state like Texas will the right to work states will probably have an easier time doing something like that unilaterally. But I don't want to get too much into it because I really don't know the legislative process of these states as to whether or not, but the states that are right to work are clearly not getting corrupted by the unions. So in that sense, generally speaking, you would think that they could change that. And frankly, they should.
That's the only way I could see out of it, other than charter schools. And charter schools, while they're implementing them, a lot of the states are pushing back on those as well.
Yeah, as long as there are unions, there's going to be a dogfight about this pension thing, and politicians don't have the will. But without spending too much time, I just wanted to throw that out there. That I know there may be people like, really, that's how it works. Like, yeah, that's how it works. So if you're wondering when you're reading the bill, like, well, this is just grants, this doesn't really matter. It does matter, and that's why it matters, because they're not. If you're running the district, you could be as good-hearted as you want. You could hate this curriculum as much as you want, but you can't let the money go. Like you'll do damage in so many other areas by not getting that money, that your hands are tied, and you've got to implement some form of it. All right. So what it is, okay, and this is where it gets creepy, right? So you read the bill, and you might say to yourself when you're reading the bill, well, this isn't so bad. I mean, they just want, this says it just wants civics legislation. They just want to increase civics education. They want to increase the amount of civics teaching and make students more active in their communities. This all stuff sounds great, right? Until you start getting into what they mean by civics, because civics is not what we all think it is. It's not. It is, okay, but what they're talking about, right, is not. And you say, well, George, is that kind of conspiracy theory? Like, why would you say that if you don't have anything to back that up? Well, actually, we do. All right. And we're going to list the links for this. I'm going to try to pull up the website right now. But the Board of Education actually explains what their views are on the topic. And it's incredibly interesting how that works. Now, again, the links will be provided in episode 4 on the patriotthinktank.com. You can go read all this stuff yourself. I'm just reading from my notes right now. But basically, in this listing, and it is called. Where is it? The Federal Register. Okay, so Federal Register. It's not like federalregister.com. It's a .gov website. The proposed priorities: American history and civics education. Okay, and this was in April 19th, 2021. Okay, and they outline. Okay, so they outline what they believe, right? American history and civics education should be, and in this page that they're, and it's fairly long, okay, but it does, you can control F, okay, which is what I do in this stuff all the time. So if you get to the link, you hit control F, and then you go ahead and type in Ibram, Ibram X Kendi. Okay, he's an author that they cite, all right, in this description of what they think civics is, right? And again, even in this page, if you don't go and find out who Ibram X Kendi is, they use a quote from him that's like really neutral and kind of nice. Like they don't get into other quotes that Kendi has, and that's where it gets fun. So their first quote, okay, that they use, or I should say the quote that they use when they refer to Kendi is as he expressed, an anti-racist idea is any idea that suggests racial groups are equals in all apparent differences and that there's nothing right or wrong with any racial group. Anti-racist ideas argue that racist policies are the cause of racial inequities. Okay? Now, even though that's fundamentally bullshit on its face, it doesn't sound nearly as bad as this. And here's another quote from Mr. Kendi. The only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. Okay? So just to wrap your head around that, what he's saying is that we have to discriminate. In order to remedy discriminations of the past, we need to discriminate against people today. So unlike a lot of leftists who try to lie about their intentions and act like, well, no, we're not discriminating against white people. We're giving, or Asians, or what in college admissions, or whoever they're discriminating against at that given time. Well, we're not discriminating against them. We're helping this person up, right? And it's like, well, yeah, but you're doing that by discriminating against that person. And what Kendi, to his credit, is just coming out straight out and saying it. like we not only need to discriminate now, but we need to discriminate in the future too. Like we need to have a culture of discrimination.
Yeah, it's payback.
Yeah. I mean, that's essentially what he's saying. That's essentially what he's saying. Yep, and there are other authors that they refer to in these articles. And it's not even an article. It's like, let me quickly try and share my screen and see if I can at least give viewers a view of this page, and so they can get a feel for what I'm looking at. And if you go and click our link from our website, which is not up yet, we haven't put the source pages up yet, but we will shortly after the show is over. So just give us a little bit of time with that, and then and we'll have that up. But right now, and this is why we need to get bigger, so I can get a producer, so I could just say, bring up the page, and it just comes up, and then I'm like a superhero. Okay, so I picked the wrong page. Hold on. This is another fun one, though, guys. So while it's up, I'll just leave it up until I make the switch. It's the National Action Civics Collaborative. So when you see the word civics in that bill, and every time they mention the word civics, I want you to go to this link for actioncivicscollaborative.org and then read what they believe action civics are. All of those interviews that were done in the beginning, in the initial video, all of those children who were just spewing, it was the most disturbing video ever, I think. Okay, if you understand what it was doing, all of those kids have already been indoctrinated. Not one of those kids had a conservative opinion among them, and there are dozens and dozens and dozens of those videos. The ones I showed, I just stopped because the video was getting to 6 minutes. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of those videos. of just indoctrinated children who now they're trying to make it official by passing this bill. But let me get to the real web page. Okay. Okay, so you can see it now, right?
Yeah.
So here's the title page, guys. Okay, this is a .gov website. It is not. It's from. It is proposed rule by the education department. So it's not like someone's interpreting it, or this is what they're putting in. Okay, and if you just do a simple Control F, and you type in. Here he is, Ibram. So here he is, down here on the bottom. Okay. So they're quoting this guy, and there's a few other authors that they quote, okay? But this is not some dude who's writing some crazy article. This is the Board of Education explaining to you what they believe civics is, okay? And without saying the word, it's action civics, okay? That's what they do. They go on to describe action civics, which by the way, this guy's a critical race theorist, okay? So to tie into last week, this is where this is all coming together. Okay, so Kendi is a critical race theorist. He's not, just some unbiased professor trying to help humanity. This guy is a hot mess and will poison your kids' brains without you even knowing. Okay, so this is where they're at, and this is where this bill is at, and the bill is designed, okay, to make sure that you just stay sleeping. Okay, you just stay sleeping. We'll take care of your kids. Send them in, and the local officials can say, "Look, we don't have a choice." Right? So they have plausible deniability on the local level. The feds are too far away to actually complain to in person, and now this all gets implemented. And now your kids are coming home, and slowly but surely they start identifying everything around them by race. Everything around them, everybody they meet, everybody they see, the cashier at the grocery store. If this kind of garbage is allowed to perpetuate, that's the way your children and our children are getting older now, okay? But in the end, if your children are really young, like this is something you have to actively combat at home. You have to actively combat this, and right now, actively combat it with your congressman. And there are 2 Republican sign-ons to this, by the way, who for no other reason should be removed for office because they clearly don't read legislation or look into legislation that they support. My suspect, and one of them is John Cornyn from Texas and Tom Cole from Oklahoma. Okay, if the people in Oklahoma and Texas find out that these guys are supporting this bill, and they will, all right, they're done.
Now, quickly, I'll put the a way to contact them on our website under the show notes. So this way our viewers can send send letters if they want to, or emails.
Absolutely. And that's what people need to do, right? So the think tank is here to toss ideas around, but also to force people to take action, right? If this stuff bothers you, that those kids are all indoctrinated in those videos, spewing, every one of them, right? So you got something to say to the president. What do you want to say? Every one of them. I want you to fully reinstate Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. I want you to make college free. I want you to eliminate all student debt. I want you one after the other. They're just laying down the leftist talking points. Okay, and every one of those kids, to each other and to everybody else, defines life by race. Every one of them.
Hey,
every one of them.
Now you add in critical race theory, and we got a 1-2 punch, right?
That's it.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah.
And this method to get it across and to try and force it on schools, like this is the scariest bit of propaganda. Okay, let's just say it passes, right? Let's just say it passes. Your children literally are going to be going to indoctrination school. It's truly like I hate using these analogies, but it's not just socialist. This is fascist. This is like psycho. Like this is taking it next level. Socialism is just about economics. This is next level. You're indoctrinating in schools now. You're affecting children. Now there are some people out there who think any education is indoctrination, right? Like, well, all education's indoctrination. Everybody is given who it depends on who's writing history and blah 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 blah. Here's why that's bullshit. Okay, there's one form of education that we used to teach in our society where people used to be taught how to think, not what to think, right? So you'd read a history book, you'd be taught the history book, you'd go through the history book. Yes, somebody's politics may have tainted that history book, but you were not taught to just believe the history book. You were taught to think about it and ask questions if you have them, and even go out and look for stuff to debunk it. We used to have encyclopedias years ago. They used to send you back. You had to go find X, Y, and Z in different encyclopedias, and then ask questions about those things, and start to critically think. Critical thinking is now they're trying to kill it. They're trying to kill it.
Yeah,
There's no way not one kid had a conservative opinion. Not one.
So yeah, yes, spoon boy, there is a spoon. What you don't see is all the shit you're being fed, right? Hey,
Exactly.
George, I'm gonna take a video call. We got on our VIP video line. I got it coming in. And,
Absolutely. Let's see who it is.
All right. All right, Elon, I'll bring that up. Like I said, I'm dedicated to help you speak in full sentences.
I would hope for as much support in that direction as we can receive.
Well, I intend to give you that support. And of course, in one version of the possible quantum outcome, you'll fail. And in another version, you'll succeed.
I think that second version is incredibly exciting and inspiring. And there need to be reasons to get up in the morning. Life can't just be about solving problems.
Well, on that note, did you go to the group therapy that I recommended?
I actually tried to hang out in the lobby, but I was too shy to talk to anyone. So I was just like studying the lobby, trying to see if there's someone I could talk to, and then I just couldn't. I was too scared to talk to anyone, so then I left.
I'm curious, Elon. Do you think the acid trips with Joe Rogan have hurt you?
After my third trip, I said, okay, well, what we really need to do here is try to solve the space transport problem, and started SpaceX.
Well, it sounds like mushrooms have been a benefit. Hey, Elon, I got to go, but I want to tell you that I enjoy having you as a client.
An honor. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. All right. Take care.
So SpaceX is the result of shrooms. That could be a front page story.
He opened up the pineal gland and saw the vision and executed.
Oh, that's funny. Elon Musk, dude, you're just a big deal. You're a big deal.
I'm telling you, little technical difficulty on my end, which is kind of embarrassing since I'm talking to Elon, right? And I can't even run a speaker system.
So, this guy's building spaceships and missiles, and you can't run a Bluetooth speaker.
Yeah, he'll help me. Yeah, he won't hire me for SpaceX, but I'm sure I can get him to speak in full sentences, although I seem to be struggling with that myself a little bit today.
Oh my God, that's great. So that was a nice break from
yes,
nice
well, I
break
saw the
from it all.
veins starting to bulge in your forehead. And I don't want you to have an aneurysm live, right? There goes George. I'll have to get a new think tank, mate.
Oh man! Hey, shout out to Gabe and Ruben and those who are watching. Chris Russo, I see. I don't know if you guys are still on. I know that was 15 minutes ago or so, but I'm trying to. When I do the production piece, I can't see the chat, so I'm just getting an opportunity to look at it now. Jack will be keeping a better eye on that, going forward. But just quickly back on this topic. So, I mean, where do we go from here, right? So, I mean, you see this Biden administration where, I mean, in my head, he's clearly not running the show, right? So, at one point when Biden had his wits about him, he was still goofy, but like he was somewhat of a centrist. Like he wasn't a lunatic, right? So at least not like these sunrise.org and AOCs and the squad and all that. So who's running this show, do you think? Like do you think it's Kamala? Because I don't think it is.
No. I mean, she didn't even make it in the primary. She was like one of the first out. And I don't want to use any expressions, but that sound so negative. But no, I don't think Kamala has any qualification along these lines whatsoever. None.
And that's the thing. So the question is, who's running it, right? And any solution that you come up with that is going to sound like a conspiracy theory. But I can't help but think that it's clear that Joe's not.
Yeah,
and this has been pondering for a while. Right, it's not Kamala. I agree, and that's the thing. So who is it, right?
She was handpicked to be put in because she could be controlled, and her deal is power. It all started with Willie Brown, but we won't go into that, right? Yeah, we'll leave that out.
So then it takes you down this avenue, though, right? Because like when we present something like critical race theory, and and to those watching, you'll get a much better full picture of this when you go to the website and start clicking through these links yourself. Okay, you'll start to that'll open up the rabbit hole for you, and then you can sort of see for yourself these websites that I'm talking about, see what's coming out of the mouth, and start to learn how to read this stuff, right? Because like normally I would read that Federal Register and I would find nothing in there, right? But like now I read it and I find references to the 1619 project, which is another one of these psycho initiatives for critical race theory and such, and leftist Marxist policy. Reading something and then having them reference Scholar Ibram X. Kendi, it seems benign when you read it, right? But when you hear them throwing out names, like you've got the Board of Education just telling you straight out, we're going with it. We're going with Action Civics. Like that's how we define civics.
Right.
And like that takes balls, right? That takes balls. One of two things. It either takes balls or they're truly betting that the populace is too dumb to figure that out. Right.
Well, look,
because there's no conspiracy here. They're just coming right out with it. They're not hiding anything. Like it's not like,
Look, they've been pumping things into the kids for 20, 30 years now. In our first episode, we saw that KGB agent come over from the United States or come over from the USSR. He talked all about the invasion into the education system. And from a communist standpoint, how they would set things up. Now, it's no longer Russia. It's us. We're doing it. There's a faction that's been so indoctrinated that we're pushing that medicine upon ourselves right now, or at least a faction of our population is and our leadership is. So,
yeah, and that's the thing, right? So, I mean, look, we've had these conversations over and over and over, and I know a lot of people that may be watching have about the way that they've infiltrated education, but like it's never been they've never tried to overreach like this, right? Like they've always gone to the university with a few lower level schools. Like you'd hear stories about a grammar school where they're reading some sexually implicit, like The King and the King, or they're trying to get some kind of sexual agenda through, like on gender or whatever, and they're doing it with little kids. But it's not like a national level where everybody for those that I know, and I know quite a few educators, they haven't worked in any schools that were actually pumping that stuff. Like, so to them, it was like, well, that's just some fringe community. They need to go deal with that,
Yeah.
Whereas now they're trying to make it like everywhere, right? They're trying to make it where your federal money is going to be dependent on it. And this is literally the federal government trying to take propaganda and control the school system, which was never designed to be the case, right? Ever. The federal government, nowhere in the Constitution does it mention education. Anywhere. And where it falls in, she said, well, then who should control it if it's not mentioned anywhere? Well, it does say in the Constitution that any powers not explicitly granted to the federal government, reside with the states
and the people.
Right. Well, that's the states, right?
Yeah.
So in the end, like the power always goes to the states. So even if but here's the catch, though, right? It's not a power issue; it's a money issue.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, though. I mean, it doesn't surprise me when you say I've never seen this type of overreach. Think of the year we're in, and think about all of the different levels of overreach that are occurring in this year. I mean, here's one example of it. We're talking about education. We have issues at the border. Issue after issue after issue. HR1, talk about an overreach there, trying to take away the power from the states as far as voting is concerned and put it in the hands of a centralized government. So we're seeing this along, it's like a multi-prong attack, and this is a component of it.
And so, one of the things that I've been following more and more lately, as I start to think about, how do we fight back on this, right? Like how do we make changes, impose changes, right, from the bottom up? And what it's done is it's gotten me more and more interested in the Convention of States. And when you want to combat things like propaganda and government control and central control, the Convention of States has never been implemented. And for those that don't know what it is, the states can absolutely amend the Constitution without any say from federal government whatsoever. None. And I believe it's a 2/3 of the states need to sign off on convention. And when they do, the federal government is forced to initiate the convention. They don't they don't vote on it in Congress. They don't do anything like that. They're forced to. Okay. And at that point, again, it's back to the states. And it's not like the House of Representatives where California gets a bigger say than Idaho. Everybody gets one vote. Everybody gets one vote, right? Because the states, in essence, are equal. So if 2/3 of the states, now I don't know if you've seen these conservative maps in recent elections or these election maps, but there's an awful lot of red on those maps. There's an awful lot of red, right? Even on this last one where they fixed like 7 states, there was still a lot of red on that map. So I mean, in the end, it's completely reasonable and DeSantis in Florida actually just jumped on board, and I'm hoping that starts a trigger reaction where, because once it starts going, once you get some big names on there, and now it becomes okay. You know what? Let's do this. Let's make this happen. Because in the past, everyone's blown this concept off because or some people falsely think that Congress could put the kibosh on it. They can't.
They can't. Yeah.
They can't. They can't. Congress has nothing to say about it. You want term limits on Congress? The states can absolutely get, and this is one of the things that they're trying to put in as a constitutional amendment is to impose term limits on Congress, and that's the reason why the Convention of States was put in, right? So everyone says the founders were such geniuses. Like, it's not that they were geniuses; they just understood what fails. Like they understood. They understood history. They were very versed in philosophy and history, and they understood how things go haywire. And with central government,
born into tyranny. They came from tyranny, right? And they saw the models of Europe. The reason people came to the United States was to get out of the mess that's known as Europe and reconfigure, reboot, and put something in place that had no representation, of a monarchy. And so they learned the hard way. And it looks like this generation is going to learn the hard way as well. They're either going to have to wake up and understand the protectionist measures that we're going to need to take, or they're going to lose a lot of freedom.
Yeah, and that's the thing. This process. So so the entire process, as far as going through with it with the convention of states, it intrigues me because it's never been done before, which tells me, if we pull this off, right? Like if we, number one, you're going to be a part of major history, right? Major history. Number two, globalists will have been dealt a blow that because now the states will be empowered, right? And I think that's like right now, I think the reason there aren't so many states signing on is because they either don't understand the full process or, they don't think that it'll work. But if they're able to, let's say they were able to impose term limits on Congress, right? Well, now the states can get together and say, you know what? We're going to ban the ability for regulatory agencies to legislate. Oh, I'm sorry. They don't legislate, they regulate. Right? But they could do that. They could say, yeah, you could have your federal agency, but they're not unilaterally making any punishable law. Like if they want to have a punishable law, that needs to do what the Constitution says it does and go through the Congress. Like Congress can't write legislation, which is what happened. They wrote legislation to create these things.
All right.
But that's like unconstitutional. That entire concept should be shot down. The Supreme Court won't do it, but it should be. Because the whole concept is ridiculous. But if the Convention of States can get the term limits on, or they can step in and completely disassociate, like just put something in the problem is it's already in the Constitution, but just try to highlight the fact that the federal government has no role in education.
Right.
None.
Well, go ahead.
They win one of those, and it could start a snowball effect to start to truly put. I mean, now they can put one in. You could put in an amendment that the balance must be, but the budget must be balanced, right? The annual budget must be balanced every year. Put it in right into the Constitution that way, right? Limit their ability to tax, right? They've got these broad powers to tax that the Supreme Court always lets go, right? These are the types of possibilities that are out there if the convention is there is a way to take down this massive government. Like, people look at it as if it's overwhelming. It's not as overwhelming as you think. I mean, once you know what I mean?
Be done at the state. It has to be done. Look, once you have power, you're not going to give it back. We have to take it back.
Right.
Right. And when you say, this next generation is going to be part of something big, I won't go into it today, but I intend to do another You Don't Know Jack on a topic called the four turnings. I don't know if you ever heard of that, George.
The four what?
The four turnings.
No, I haven't.
I don't want to go into it today. But it's put together by a statistical group that talks about how to predict future for the business. They have a very logical way of assessing things, but it also applies to, the state of affairs from a society where we are right now. And
they have a history of being right.
Yeah. I'll go. Easy for me to say. See, sorry, Elon. Maybe I need lessons. But I'll put together a whole or a little piece on it, and you and I will probably talk about it during the course of the week. I know. Where are we now? We're about an hour and 15 in. I mean, you want to keep going?
Nope. We can dial it in. I'm good. I think people get the point of what we were talking about. So what we're trying to alarm you to. Give us a few hours to get the website updated if you're watching this live, and we will get all the sources and dig work for you done. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, guys. We're trying to get to 100 subscribers. 100 subscribers. So please, make sure if you're watching on YouTube, click subscribe. If you're not watching on YouTube, click subscribe, and also make sure you're following us on Facebook. All right. So I am going to cut us into the latest episode of You Don't Know Jack. What's that say? Gabe's like, I'm here. That's great. All right. So let me, Gabe, More power, buddy. Thank you for tuning in. And I'm having a little issue with my production. This production today has just been an absolute nightmare.
So while
like
you're doing that, let me tell you, my wife says to me, she goes, "You're really going to wear that shirt for the show?" She goes, "What are you trying to do? Bring back Led Zeppelin?" I said, "I never knew they were gone."
Yeah, that I don't know where you got that song that the Floyd song that you plugged into your demos, but like I like Pink Floyd though. I like Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
But that one song I just never heard, and it was dozing me a little bit.
If
All right,
you never
so
heard, all right, go.
No, I never heard what.
If you never heard that song, I
haven't.
All right. Well, we'll go to the planetarium and we'll listen to Pink Floyd one night.
Yeah, no doubt. I'll plant the mushrooms right now. So let's go ahead and check out You Don't Know Jack, this week's edition, episode.
Our discussion today is about menticide. Menticide is the killing of the mind and spirit. I'll begin with a document originally published in 2003 by the Federation of American Scientists. It's a psychological operation planning guide, or PsyOp. It's used by our military to influence target audiences within the countries of our enemies. The question in my mind is whether components of this toolbox are being used against you and I to commit menticide. I'll post a link on our site so you can come back and do a deeper dive. For now, just make a mental note that when I talk about tactics today, they're coming from this document. Looking at menticide from a high level, it sets two sides on a delusional trajectory. With an air of superiority, the effector becomes increasingly aggressive as each wave crashes down. On the other side, the effected loses some sense of self-reliance and becomes increasingly dependent with each ebb of the tide. When I say wave, that entails the use of PsyOp tactics. The idea is to create chaos and confusion by disrupting the norm. Let's see if some of the tactics in the PsyOp manual can be applied to our current environment. Situational dramatization. I know we only have 10 years to live, Greta. Isolation. But it's only for 2 weeks. Mixed messaging. So, Dr. Fauci, is it yes or no? 1 or 2? Inside or outside? Segregation. United we stand, divided we fall. Character assassination. Sorry, Honest Abe and Mr. Potato Head, you're out. Censorship. Hey, Pollard, get off my cloud. Do you see some of the correlations that I do? Each one of those tactics is followed by an offer of relief from chaos by accepting a loss of freedom, until finally we are a nation of compliance and conformity. It becomes our new norm. And the ones left that wouldn't sacrifice freedom, regardless of the torturous effects of menticide, they're considered radicals and they'll be alienated. I personally can't help but compare this to recent discussions surrounding vaccine passports for a virus with a 99.7% or so recovery rate. What do you think? Do you think menticide is at work? I certainly believe there is enough of a comparison to reasonably suspect there is. The good news is that right now people are standing up all around the country and pushing back. George and I are doing this to get more people to question what's happening and inspire them to push back. I'm going to ask you again to go to our website, take the critical thinking test, browse around and do some reading or watch some videos. Then think of who you know that would benefit and send them there. Help people own their own mind. All right, that's it. In closing, the next time someone tries to feed you their baseless opinion, just remember, if it looks like dog shit and it smells like dog shit, the probability is they don't know jack.
That's the fact, Jack. That's a fact, Jack.
If it looks like it and it smells like it,
it probably is.
Oh,
Don't taste it.
good.
Don't taste it. The two should get you there enough. Yeah. You know, once you taste it, it's over.
Oh, that's great. That's great. All right, man. So, yeah, I think we're good for today. Let's get to work on getting the website updated. Anybody has any questions about anything they heard today, let me know. We're going to repost this video as an edit to chop out a little bit of that, or I may leave it in. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But nonetheless, thank you, everyone, for watching. We need to get to 100 subscribers. Let's get there. Jack, say goodbye.
Yeah, I will. I just want to let everybody know that we're thinking about recording our episodes instead of going live. And this way we have a little bit more time to make sure that we can cut out some of these production flaws because of the software.
Also, we want to engage more. So we also want to be able, it's the kind of thing where like I don't get to really, it's hard to show you what I look at on my screen here, but I've got all of our cue clips and any audio that I got to put in and things of that nature. And it's either that or the chat. So I don't get the opportunity to kind of, play with both as much. So I kind of go back to the chat after the show, and we'd rather engage at the time. So we're going to pick a midweek date to launch. So we will launch at a specific time every week once we get this dialed in. And then at that point, we will be online for that so that while it's going on, we can comment in and reply to comments and things like that a little bit better, because this platform is not the best for that.
Okay,
right.
now I'll say goodbye. Goodbye.
Now
George.
you will say goodbye. Take care.
And like that,